Howdy folks, welcome to Module 1 of Security Plus. This version of the course is based on the SY0-701 version of Security Plus, which is currently the latest version of the course at the time of this recording. This version of the course can, however, also be used to study for newer versions of the course if they eventually do come out, since the content do generally stay about 95% the same. So yeah, if a newer version comes out, you can also go and use this to go and study for that. Now, as for this first module of the course, as you can see, it is called Fundamental Security Concepts. Now folks, if you're new on my channel or to this course, the full official course, folks, consists of 16 modules, and that is exactly how I will deliver it here on this channel. There will be a full dedicated video to cover each of the 16 modules of this course. And by the end of the course, you should be able to sit for the official certification exam associated with this course. Alrighty, and then folks, as for the objectives that will be covered in this first module of the course, there are 3 of them. The first one is summarize information security concepts, so we'll be covering that objective. The second objective is compare and contrast security control types. And then the third and the last objective in this module will be describe security roles and responsibilities. So by the end of this module, we would have covered all 3 of those objectives. As for the agenda for this module, folks, there are 2 main sections in this module. The first is security concepts, which we'll dive into just in a few moments. The second main section is security controls. Alright, and then lastly, folks, before we start learning, if you haven't done it already, do your homie here a favor and give this video a like. It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort to create these lessons, so yeah, you'll be helping a brother out. Then also, if you'd like to know when the next module of this course comes out, or any of my other content for that matter, maybe also consider subscribing. Alright, and then with all the formalities now out of the way, let's dive into Module 1. Alright folks, let's start at that first main section, security concepts. Within this first main section, the first topic up is information security. So what we're going to be talking about here is the CIA triad. There's a bit of a picture for you guys there on the right hand side. Now, the first thing I want to mention about this, folks, is this is not to be confused with the federal authority in the United States of America. It's not the same CIA. So that CIA in America stands for Central Intelligence, blah, blah, blah. They investigate and all that kinds of stuff. This is absolutely not the same thing. This CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as you guys can see in my triangle that I've got for you guys there at the top right-hand side. Now, apparently, according to CompTIA, due to the confusion, this is what they say, due to the confusion of the American authority and blah, 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 CIA is sometimes referred to as AIC. It's literally the same letters, just in reverse. Now, I can tell you guys from experience that's total hogwash. That's nonsense. Nowhere in any manual will you see that. It's not asked in any exam, and absolutely nobody in real life will go and talk about AIC. So in real life, we also just refer to it as the CIA. And normally if you're in IT, especially if you're in security in IT, you will know what someone is talking about when they talk about the CIA triad. So regarding this little triangle, the first one up we're going to be talking about is the C in CIA, which is confidentiality. Now I'm sure you all know what confidentiality is because that obviously extends well beyond IT. So in real life, confidentiality could, for example, be something in an envelope. It does not necessarily mean you've got security if something is in an envelope, but it does give you a sense of confidentiality because other folks can see what is in that envelope. This could be something private. This could be medical records. This could be your pay slip, your salary invoice. The point here, folks, is it's confidential and it's for certain people's eyes only, authorized people only. So for confidentiality, we can say information can only be viewed or read by people authorized to do so. Now in IT, there is many ways we can achieve confidentiality, and sometimes some of these methods accidentally give you integrity as well, or availability if you're lucky. Normally they'll only give you the one or the other in a triangle, but if you're lucky, they might just give you more than one of these items in the triangle. Ideally we want to achieve all of these, but it's not always possible. Sometimes we need to go and combine multiple things. So if I, for example, put a private document in an envelope, yes, it gives me confidentiality in real life, but it does not give me integrity because anybody can go and tamper with it, and it does not have anything to do with availability. So more on that in just a moment. As for the I in CIA, folks, that is integrity. Integrity means something is authentic, it's original, it has not been tampered with, in other words. So in IT, if I, for example, send you, let's say, an email, how do you know this email is really from me? I mean, sure, you might say, okay, well, you can see the email looks like it's coming from my email address, but how do you know somebody has not spoofed my email address? That means they're forging my email address. Or how do you know somebody has not compromised my email address? They maybe might have hacked my email address and they've taken it over, and now they're sending emails as if they are me. Or maybe I did send you an email, but somebody or something has intercepted this email and they've altered it in some sort of way, or the contents of it in some sort of way, and it's no longer the original contents. It might even be a document for that matter. So how do we ensure integrity? Now, one of the many ways we can do that, I mean, just using email as an example here, folks, is to use what we call certificates and digital signatures. So the same applies in real life. If you look at a document in real life, let's say a contract, how do we ensure it's legit, authentic? Most often this is done using signatures. So if me and you come into some sort of agreement and we decide to put this on paper, both parties, me and you, will probably sign this agreement. And if you decide to go and change something in this agreement afterwards, or I decide to go and change something in this agreement afterwards, I need you to go and re-sign it, and then obviously you're going to know the jig is up. Now, I can try and forge your signature, or you can try and forge mine, but normally that's going to be a very difficult task to achieve. So that's how we ensure integrity in real life, so that someone don't go and tamper with a contract afterwards and change the contents without the other person knowing about it. Now in IT, you also get digital contracts, and you can achieve the same goal. You can either go and scan in, a physical copy of a contract, or you can actually go and, believe it or not, apply a digital signature to documents. You get many kinds of digital signatures. Scary thought, isn't it? So the IT world is very vast, folks. You get many kinds of digital signatures. At the end of the day, they achieve the same goal, and is to make sure something is authentic and original. So for emails, one way we can achieve integrity is to go and encrypt the emails, perhaps, to use some sort of digital signature, perhaps. So if you receive an email from me and you see there's no digital signature, or it's not the original signature, then you know this email is either not from me or somebody has tampered with this email in some sort of way. Alright, so with integrity, we can say this is to ensure data is authentic and original. Any changes are authorized. Now, as for the A in the CIA triad, folks, that is availability. So this is basically just to ensure information is always accessible. So if it's on a server, we want to make sure that server is highly available. There's two or more of the same server, giving us redundancy and fault tolerance. We want to make sure there's backup internet connections, backup hard drives, backup this, backup that. So at the end of the day, whatever information you have and wherever it might be, it needs to always be available. That is availability. So we can say availability is information is always accessible to those authorized to view it. So something like a server that might be offline is not supposed to cause people not to be able to access data, because that can be disastrous in a company environment. Now, getting back to the C of confidentiality, because I told you guys we're going to get back to some of these. I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if you guys remember, that depending on what solution you implement, you might get lucky and you might be able to cover more than one of these boxes in the CIA triad. If you look at, let's say, encryption, let's say BitLocker encryption. BitLocker encryption, which is used to encrypt a whole freaking hard drive, a whole volume on a computer, for those of you who don't know, that will give you confidentiality because people won't be able to see the contents of your hard drive. But at the same time, it actually gives you integrity because nobody will be able to tamper the contents of the hard drive. So that's just one example of where you can achieve more than one thing using just one object, in this case, BitLocker. Alright folks, let's move on to the next topic in this section, which is cybersecurity framework. So the first thing I'm going to do here for you guys is I'm going to add 2 points here. The first of which is defense, and the second one is going to be to attack, an attacker. So when it comes to security, or more specifically the cybersecurity framework, we are constantly going to be in a battle to defend our networks, to defend our infrastructure and our whole environment in our company. So basically, you guys can think of yourself as a white hat hacker, if you guys know what that is. You get black hat hackers and you get white hat hackers. So a white hat hacker needs to be better than a normal hacker because you need to be able to protect your environment or that of your client. Yes, there's such a thing, guys. So you can basically think of the white hat hackers as the good guys. So if you want to catch a criminal, you sometimes need to hire a criminal. Yeah, so you guys are not going to be criminals per se, but you need to be able to think like a hacker and you need to have the knowledge of a hacker to be able to protect your environments from said hackers. Your job is going to be to defend and defend and defend, and you need to know what these bad guys are going to do when it comes to attacking and attacking and attacking. So the first thing we need to talk about is to identify. You need to know what can be used and how you can go about it when it comes to identifying potential threats in your environment or that of your client's company. So this consists and includes things like developing security policies and capabilities, evaluating risks, threats, and vulnerabilities, and recommending security controls to mitigate them. So sometimes you'll find that at clients, you don't always have full control. Sometimes you can only recommend or suggest. You wouldn't believe how frustrating that can be. I've had so many clients where I can see they're wide open for attack, and sometimes the solution is so simple. And there's nothing I can do about it besides recommending to the client, sir, ma'am, you've got the following issues in your environment. And this is sometimes nothing complicated at all. Someone that's got no idea what they're doing in IT will even understand what these things are if you go and put it in simple terms. And I will tell them very simply that, sir, you need to do the following. Can I do it for you? And they'll say, no, please don't do that. And I'm like, okay. And at the end of the day, the client is always right. They get what they want. All we can do is recommend and suggest sometimes. Now, if you're lucky, you might be working for one company where you have been tasked to do these things. You don't need to go and ask. Your job is to go and do these things. So if you're lucky enough to be able to go and do these things, your job is going to be to go and identify. There's various softwares you can go and use. You'll find you've got all kinds of fancy monitoring software these days and all kinds of platforms that allow you to monitor your network, your security, your internet usage, your servers. There's just about not a thing out there these days that we cannot go and monitor, guys. The second thing you need to go and do is protect. This consists of procure and development, install, operate, and decommissioning of IT hardware and software assets with security as an embedded requirement of every stage of this operations lifecycle. So in a nutshell, if that doesn't make sense to you guys, you're going to have to go and do a couple of installations, which includes those monitoring softwares I've mentioned earlier. Some of them you need to install, some of them you don't. Sometimes you just need to have some sort of subscriptions. If you go look at some of the cloud platforms we've got these days, it's literally just a matter of you need to have the right license or the right subscription, and voila, you'll have the extra fancy tools to your disposal. Other times it involves you installing hardware or software. This could be something like a firewall, an actual physical firewall you've got to go and install at your company's environment or your client's company environment. This could be a software-based firewall. It's a cheaper version, but that's normally only going to be found in SOHO environments, in other words, small office, home or office environments. But for the most part, in medium to large size companies, you can expect to be installing a physical firewall. This could also potentially be other forms of security that you can go and install. This could be something like an antivirus. Yes, something as simple as an antivirus. This could potentially be physical security, like CCTV cameras. Not exactly related to this, but it still forms as part of installing something and operating something and protecting something. Step 3, folks, detect. Now you get to go and use your fancy monitoring software, your CCTV, your antivirus, your firewall. Those things are used to detect potential threats. Now, yes, sometimes you're going to get false positives. That means it's going to detect something, but it turns out to be false. It's not really a threat. It's just, well, we call that a false positive. It's a false alarm, in other words. But I'd rather have too many false alarms than no alarms going off when someone, happens to potentially hack your company. I always tell my people, rather have too many false alarms than having no alarms going off at all. Some alarm is always better than no alarm. So under the tech, we say this is to perform ongoing, proactive monitoring to ensure that controls are effective and capable of protecting against new types of threats, folks. Step 4, and there's 5 steps by the way, respond. This is to identify, analyze, contain, and eradicate threats to systems and data security. Now, you folks will find that a lot of these steps do tend to somewhat overlap with one another. So one of the things we can use to go and respond is an antivirus, although antiviruses tend to respond automatically. So that's not a bad thing, but it does form part of respond. Now, depending on the fancy software you've got to your disposal in your company or your client's company, some of them will only do monitoring, but they don't really do anything other than that. You're going to have to go and do stuff manually, which sucks. And sometimes it's not possible. Some of these tools do, however, allow you to respond to a certain degree. So some of these fancy tools will be things like 365. So if you guys are familiar with Microsoft, specifically Microsoft's Azure platform and the Microsoft 365 platform, they've got a lot of tools you guys can use, not just to monitor, but also to go and respond to threats in the cloud, because a lot of companies these days make use of Microsoft 365 and Microsoft's Azure platform. That and obviously other platforms out there like AWS and all those kinds of things. Then you get other tools like SCCM, which just happens to also be a Microsoft tool. You get Microsoft's Intune tool. All of these tools are used not just to monitor, but to actually take action, to react and not just monitor. The last step here, folks, is to recover. And I think that speaks for itself. So if you eventually get yourself in that situation, and let's face it, it is going to happen, where a threat happens to do what it was supposed to do. The hacker got in, or the malware that infiltrated your company's environment, it happened to get in and it happened to do some sort of damage. How do you recover from that? When do you recover from that? And how long does it take you to recover from that? All companies should always have backups in place. This includes, but is not limited to, daily backups, weekly backups, monthly backups, and my goodness, folks, offsite backups. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have backups, especially offsite backups. There's a lot of threats out there, especially ransomware, that know you do backups, and they actually get into your backups. They lie dormant on your system for about a few days, weeks or months at a time, and eventually when they activate, the trigger, it encrypts all your backups, including your monthly backups. So the only way you can recover from that is to have offsite backups that were not plugged in anywhere. Now, this is easier said than done. Obviously, everything is easier said than done. Backups, guys, are very expensive. The more you have, the more expensive they are. Especially offsite backups. They are sometimes stupid expensive. So it's very easy for me to go and say, hey, go do backups. But sometimes some companies, they know they need to go and do backups, but they simply can't because the budget does not allow it. But my goodness, guys, if your budget allows it, please go and do those backups. So under recovery, we can say this is to implement cybersecurity resilience to restore systems and data if other controls are unavailable to prevent attacks. So if your security, your firewalls, your antivirus, and whatever other things you had in place, if they fail to keep this threat out, this person or this malware, whatever it might be, you need to have some sort of contingency in place. What can you go and do to go and recover, and how long will it take you to go and recover? All right, folks. So regarding this cybersecurity framework, I've been referring to it as levels or steps, but I suppose you can actually call these functions. That's actually what they're called. They're not really called steps or levels. They're actually called functions. So information security and cybersecurity tasks can be classified as 5 functions, which is the ones I've just labeled for you guys, which are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the 5 functions. So the following framework was developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. In other words, NIST for short. Alright, so still on the same topic of cybersecurity framework, I'm just going to rearrange this a little bit differently for you guys. So normally how this works, if we have to try and paint a picture as to how this all fits together, at the top, we'll normally go and put identify. And as we know, that is to go and develop your policies, get your monitoring in place and all that. Right below that, you'll go and put your protect function. So protect is to go and actually implement the security, your antivirus and all that. And then below protect, you'll find the other three remaining functions, which is detect, respond, and recover. Now, looking at the way I've organized this, from the bottom, the attackers would normally attack you and your environment, or that environment of your client or the company that you're working for. So detect, respond, and recover is going to be at the bottom, and they're going to be dealing with the attackers. Defense is from the top. You would remember earlier, I classified all of these 5 functions into 2 categories, 2 main categories, defense and attack. So defense is going to be coming from the top, from the back, so to speak, which is going to be from identify, then it's going to go through protect and all that. And attack is going to be from the front, or in this case from the bottom, and attackers will have to go through detect, respond, and recover. Now, if this is still confusing to you folks, don't stress. We're going to go a little bit more in depth with this later in the course once we've covered a couple of other topics which will help this one make a little bit more sense. For now, let's move on to the next topic in this first main section, and that, folks, is access control. Now, the name alone should tell you pretty much what you need to know. It's to control access, who can access what and when and where. Basically, privilege in a nutshell, I suppose. So there's 4 main things you need to know when we talk about access control. The first of which is identification. To identify who is who, what is what, and that's normally done via identities of some sort of kind. So under identification, we can say the system owner, which is probably going to be you in most cases, confirms the user's identity and creates an account to represent the user. So if you look at an on-premises company environment, this is most likely going to be done on your Active Directory environment. So you or some sort of administrator will go and create an account on the Active Directory, and that is going to be used by the user to log in and to identify the user and ultimately to go and check what level of access they've got, which is, well, privilege. Nowadays, we know this extends well beyond just on-premises. Obviously, these days we use things like Microsoft Azure, 365, and much, much more. So these user accounts are not necessarily created on premises anymore. These could very well be created in the cloud. So this could be a cloud Active Directory account amongst many other kinds of accounts. Now, secondly, guys, under access control, we talk about authentication. So authentication is to check if someone is who they claim to be or what they claim to be. And this is obviously done using identities. So a user, if it's a human being, they will normally need to provide something like a username and an email address combined with a password. This could potentially be a fingerprint, a retina eye scan. This could be voice recognition, face recognition. This could be a smart card. It could be many, many things. The point here is the user, which may or may not be you, might be a client or a user of yours, they will need to now prove they are who they claim to be. Otherwise, any willy-nilly can gain access to this account or this device. So authentication is to prove you are who you claim to be, or in some rare cases, what you claim to be, because sometimes a server or something like a server needs to authenticate to another server. Yes, that's a thing, folks. Now, the third main thing you need to know about regarding access control is authorization. Now, authentication, the previous one we spoke about, you can think of that as step 1, to check if someone is who they claim to be. Step 2, which unfortunately does not always take place, is to check what level of access somebody or something has once they have authenticated. So you can think of this as a domain account on premises, for those of you that knows what a domain account is. So once somebody has logged in, it's going to check what permissions, what privilege that individual has on their account. So it might see, oh, this is an administrator. He or she's got full access. Or, oh, this is a manager. They've got a lot of access. They can see all the following departments. Or, oh, this is just a trainer like myself. The trainer, you will expect them to only have access to things like slides, manuals, exams, course material. So depending on who you are, what department you work in and all that, that will determine what level of access you've got, which we refer to as privilege or permissions. Now, this does not always take place. I mean, if you log into something like a Facebook account, a Gmail account, anything like that, or even your own personal laptop, you probably have full outright access. So authorization doesn't really take place there per se. But if you look at something like a domain environment, which is a very good example for this, authorization does kick in. And it is going to check what level of access you or the user has. So for authorization, we can say for each action the account performs, a permission list is checked to allow or deny the action that the user wants to go and do. Lastly, folks, the fourth thing I'm going to mention here under access control, which is the last one, is accounting. Now, accounting, the name alone should tell you what you need to know. So this is to basically kind of sort of keep logs of sorts. So the system tracks permission usage in a log. The user cannot prevent the auditing. So, yeah, these days, guys, you might have seen nobody cannot do anything without somebody knowing about it. Doesn't matter if it's on premises, on your own laptop, your personal laptop or desktop, or on a company laptop or desktop, a phone, a tablet. This can be online. You can be anybody on any platform and you can do anything. Everything is logged. So you'll find that if a hacker always is about to get caught, they'll always go and burn the PC or physically completely destroy it because anything can be recovered. Even if you go and delete it permanently, even if you go and format your hard drive, anything can always be recovered. So yeah, keep that in mind the next time you get up to some sort of shenanigans, folks. Alright, folks, so let's move on to the second main section in this module, and that, in case you don't remember, was security controls. The first topic we're going to talk about in this section is security control categories. Yes, I kid you not, there are categories. The first one is managerial, and I cannot even pronounce that word because I'm not English. So yeah, forgive me if I'm butchering the name. So this is normally someone that's in charge, some sort of manager. Could be a general manager, could be an IT manager. Generally, managers needs to know who is doing what. They need to know what's going on in general in a company, or at least in their respective department. So this is to give oversight of a system, or in some cases, a department. So that's just one form of security control category. It's managerial. Now, something, folks, I want to quickly mention before we move on to the next security control category is regarding this managerial. There I go again saying it, hoping I'm not butchering it. Is a couple of examples would be to include risk identification or a tool allowing the evaluation and selection of other security controls. So that's just something else I wanted to add on to managerial. Now, the second security control category we get is operational. So operational, the control is implemented primarily by people. For example, security guards and training programs are operational controls, just in case you guys didn't know. So those are a couple of examples. So what we can say here is operational relies on a person for implementation. As for the third security control category that I've got for you guys, that would be technical. So in the technical category, the control is implemented as a system. This will be things like hardware, software, or firmware. For example, firewalls, antivirus software, and operating system access control models are technical control examples. So in other words, it is implemented in operating systems, software, and security appliances, because something like a firewall is an appliance. Yes, you get firewalls like the Windows firewall, and firewalls you can go and buy and install, but in a proper medium to large size company, a firewall, folks, is normally an actual physical device, a security appliance, and let me tell you, they do not come cheap. Very, very expensive. You get many brands, many models, and depending on how much money you throw at it, yeah, that'll dictate how many functions you've got and how many people it can actually handle. Lastly, folks, the last security control category I've got for you guys is physical. Now, physical tells you a lot that you need to know here. So this is devices that mediate access to premises and hardware. Now, regarding physical controls, guys, physical controls such as alarms, gateways, locks, lighting, and security cameras that deter and detect access to premises and hardware, they're often placed in a separate category to technical controls. So it's in a different category normally. Folks, and then I'm going to move you guys on to the next topic in this video, which is actually very much the same thing. So instead of talking about security control categories, we are going to talk a bit about security control types. Very much the same thing, but not exactly the same thing. So you get things like administrative controls, technical controls, and physical controls. Now, with each of these, you get three subcategories, if I can call it that. You get preventative, detective, and corrective. Now, to help you understand this, I'm going to give you guys lots of examples, and this is possibly something they can ask you in the exam. So, starting with administrative controls, if we look under preventative, this could be things like hiring and termination policies. It could possibly be things like separation of duties, who's doing what and what are your duties and responsibilities in the company. This could possibly be things like data classification, to classify your data correctly in categories and all that, so that people know what to find, where to find it, who is what, whose responsibility, and all that kinds of jazz. And if we look at the detective section here, that under administrative controls will be things like reviewing access rights. Who has access to what? Should they still have access to that? Or do they not have enough access for their responsibilities? This includes, but it's not limited to, things like audit logs and unauthorized changes that could possibly fall under detective. And if we look under the corrective section of administrative controls, this can be things like implementing a business continuity plan. So in the event of something going sideways, what is plan B? How quickly can you be up and running? And will you be offline, if offline at all? Hopefully you're not going to be offline at all. Ideally, you want to have all systems running non-stop, even though something might have gone wrong in the background. Under corrective, we also have things like have an incident response plan, which is pretty much the same thing. So in the event of something going sideways, what is plan B? Do you have backups in place? Backup servers, backup internet, backup technicians, backup this, backup that. So you need to have fault tolerance and high redundancy, in other words, is what we're saying. Now, if you look at the technical controls section there, once again starting under preventative. So under technical controls, what will be seen as preventative will be things like firewalls, IPS, MFA, and antivirus. These are seen as preventative under technical controls. Under detective, but still under the technical controls, this will be things like IDS, in other words, intrusion detection system, or honeypots. Now, honeypots is something we're going to be talking about a lot in this course, as well as quite a few of these other things I've mentioned thus far. And then under corrective, but still under technical controls, this will be things like vulnerability patching, to prevent someone from exploiting something. So you're just going to go and patch anything before someone takes advantage of that. This could be rebooting a system so that updates can take effect, patches can take effect, that kinds of nonsense. And it can also be to quarantine a virus. So to go and quarantine a virus or some sort of malware is seen as corrective under technical controls. And then the last main control type, guys, physical controls. So physical is usually things you can see and touch. So preventative would be things like a fence, a gate, a lock. I think you guys see where we're going with this. If we talk about detective, this will be things like CCTV, to detect if someone is up to something. It doesn't really prevent them, it's more to detect them. So CCTV, and on that note, we can probably go and add surveillance cameras, which is pretty much the same thing. And then corrective, to go and physically repair physical damage, or to go and reissue access cards. So if someone needs an access card to go and enter a certain section of the building or a certain section of the business, to go and reissue an actual physical card to individuals or users or employees, that is seen as corrective under physical controls, folks. Alright, folks, and then moving on to the next topic, which is still kind of the same topic, still security control types. So, in case you didn't know, while most controls can be classed functionally as preventative, detective, or corrective, like we just discussed, a few other types can be used to define other cases. So there are a couple of weird scenarios out there. So a couple of ones that I'm going to mention to you is, first of all, directive. So that's a directive security control type. Now, looking at the name once again, we can kind of guess what this will be about. It's to direct the users into a certain kind of behavior. So with that being said, we say this enforces a rule of behavior. This could be something such as a policy. So if your company has some sort of policy that policy can sometimes force your users or the users of your client's company to behave a certain way. This policy will either outright block them from doing certain things, or it'll just kind of encourage certain behavior. This could, for example, also be best practice standard. So maybe your company or your client's company's got some sort of best practice standard, a certain way they prefer to do things, which is not necessarily illegal or illegal or against any rules. It's just a certain way that your company or your client's company prefers to do things. A best practice standard, if you will, to force people to behave a certain way with certain things. Other things that forces people to behave a certain way is, for example, a standard operating procedure, which most companies just refer to as an SOP. Almost all companies have got an SOP. And you'll find a lot of companies have actually got multiple SOPs. It depends on which department you work in. So the SOP, in case you guys don't know, is what your responsibilities are. So if you look at me, I'm an IT trainer. So my responsibilities as an IT trainer might be to get you to pass the exam, to make sure you understand the exam objectives. If you are an official course of mine, I'll maybe record attendance. And if you attend all the days of the course, I'll issue you with an attendance certificate, that kind of stuff. So that's my SOP. Every department and every company has got their own unique SOP, and that basically dictates what that person has to do in that department. And obviously, if people don't do what they're supposed to do, then there may or may not be consequences to that. They might just give you a slap on the wrist. You might be called into the boss's office. It's kind of like getting called into the principal's office in school. And the boss might give you a scolding. They might give you a written warning or a verbal warning. Eventually, there might even be a disciplinary action. You never know. So with that in mind, you'll find it very often in your contract or contracts of some sort of employee, there will be some sort of contract, and in that contract, there's a procedure that basically explains what the disciplinary actions will be. So if you don't do X, Y, and Z, the following will happen. So it's expected of you to do A, B, and C, failing which the following will happen. Now, another security control type we get, besides this directive one, wow, there's a lot of them, is deterrent. Now, I hope to goodness that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's basically to prevent people outright from doing something. So this one, we say it psychologically discourages intrusions. I suppose it's probably incorrect to say that it outright stops them. It just psychologically discourages. Wow, I can't even say that. Don't laugh at me. So I suppose if you look at burglar bars on a window, a little off topic, it's still security, that discourages someone. It doesn't completely stop them, and it's somewhat going to stop them, but it just discourages them. So psychologically, that might be something like a security camera, maybe. I mean, a security camera doesn't stop you from committing a crime, but if you know it's there, and if you know the cameras are looking at you, and that you may or may not potentially get caught doing whatever shenanigans you're about to do, that could psychologically stop you from doing whatever it was that you were about to go and do. So within this category, we can say this control may not physically or logically prevent access. It's not going to outright stop you, but it can psychologically discourage an attacker from attempting an intrusion. So if you notice a security camera, or you might know there's an emotion detection system in place, then you might not go and do whatever shenanigans you're about to go and do. This could also include signs and warnings of legal penalties against trespass or intrusion. So if you look at real life examples, this is not just an IT, guys. So if there's a sign up outside some sort of property that says if you trespass, there's going to be prosecution or the following is going to happen. Heck, they might even say they're going to shoot you for all we know. That is going to discourage you from going onto that property. Another example would be speeding cameras. In a lot of countries, they've got signs up that says if you speed over the following speeding limit, there's going to be a speed camera, they're going to catch you, and you're going to get a huge fine. Now, that doesn't stop you from speeding. At the end of the day, it's not going to do anything. I can go and speed at the speed of light if I want to on that freeway or whatever road I'm driving on. But if I know there's going to be a potential fine in the mail for me because of a speeding camera, then I might not do it. So it's to discourage bad behavior and enforce good behavior. It doesn't actually stop anyone. It's just to enforce good behavior. It's to kind of control the behavior of people. And then the third one I've got for you guys on this list, which is the last one, compensating. So this basically substitutes for a principal control. I suppose we can also say It's associated with framework and compliance measures, perhaps. So that doesn't make sense. Let me put it this way. Compensating is a control, or it's a substitute for a principal control as recommended by a security standard, and affords the same, if not better, level of protection, but uses a different methodology or technology. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense for you guys. It's a very difficult one to explain, let me put it that way. Anyway, folks, this security control types that we've been talking about so much up until now. Let me just get this out of the way first and make a blank page. So, cybersecurity control is broadly specified into 7 categories, in case you guys didn't know. So, I'm just going to kind of summarize it here for you guys into 7 main broad categories. The 7 main categories is as follows. The first one is directive, which I literally just explained to you guys a few moments ago. Then you get deterrent controls, which I kind of failed to pronounce earlier, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly now. You get preventative controls, the name speaks for itself. You get compensating controls, which I also spoke about a few moments ago. So number 1, 2, and 4 are the 3 that I just spoke about a few moments ago. You get detective controls, you get corrective controls, and then lastly, you get recovery controls. So the 3 that I just spoke about previously, just a few moments ago, that was number 1, number 2, and number 4. Directive, deterrent, and compensating. Gave you guys a bit of a description of each of those. Now, if that's not enough for you guys, let me just get this out of the way. Let's quickly give you guys a brief description again of each of these, just in case the previous descriptions did not make a lot of sense to you guys, because it's very important you guys understand this for the exam. So to repeat myself with directive controls, a little bit of a different description for you guys. Directive controls are the mandatory controls that are implemented to monitor the regulations. It provides guidance primarily aligned with the organization's policies and regulations. So that's what it is in a nutshell. And we're going to do this for each of these 7 that I've got for you guys. So moving on to number 2, which is deterrent controls, the ones that I keep failing to pronounce. Please let me know in the comment section down below if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. So number 2, deterrent controls are deployed to discourage the violation of a security function, and it helps to reduce the chances of a deliberate attack. Deterrent controls help to make intelligent decisions and deter the way that it's not secure to use. Alright folks, and then before we move on to number 3 here, which is preventative controls, for those of you that's been watching my YouTube videos, especially if you watched my other courses, you would know that I like to play a little bit of a game in some of my videos. So this is normally towards the end of a video. So in this video, I've got a hidden phrase for you guys, and the idea of this hidden phrase is for you guys to play a bit of a game. This is completely optional, you do not need to go and do this. So the hidden phrase for today's video is applesauce. And what I need you guys to do, which is completely optional, is to either type the word as is in the comment section down below, or to preferably, this is the more fun part, to create some sort of creative sentence using the words applesauce. Now, where it gets fun is if anybody else is reading the comment section and did not watch the video yet, they're going to be like, what the heck is going on here? Why are people talking about applesauce so much? They're going to be very confused, and only people who actually watch the video up until this point would know what the heck is going on. So it's a bit of an inside joke, if you want to call it that. So feel free to play this if you want to. You don't have to go and do that. If you are going to play along, please keep to YouTube's rules and policies. Do not swear. Do not say something mean. But you are allowed to be a bit creative. So you can use it either or. You can use it as is. But it's going to be more fun if you make some sort of creative sentence using the words applesauce. This does not stop you from asking any questions down below. So if you've got any questions about something that's been discussed in this specific module, please, by all means, feel free to ask your questions down below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Alternatively, you can join the channel's Discord server that you'll find in the video description down below. So it's literally going to be the very bottom of the video description. Check out that link. Join the Discord server if you've not done so already. And you'll find me, as well as a couple of other IT trainers on there, and thousands of other students on there that studies this course, as well as other courses. So if you've got a question, either myself or somebody will be there to assist you. And who knows, maybe you can help someone else that's struggling on this course. Anyway, folks, moving on to number 3, preventative controls. So if you don't know what that is, or if you don't remember what that is, preventative controls are used to prevent or avoid security incidents in the organization. It helps to mitigate unauthorized activities by indulging preventative methods in the organization. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. So we're just trying to prevent people from doing certain shenanigans. And then moving on to number 4, which I did briefly explain a few moments ago, compensating controls. So if I have to put this a different way for you guys, compensating controls are the alternative methods that support the requirement of actual security controls implemented. The role of the compensating control is to provide a similar level of assurance even if the attacker has compromised the actual security control. So hopefully that description makes a little bit more sense to you guys than the previous one I gave you guys. Moving on to number 5, detective controls. Doesn't that just sound cool? So if you don't know what that is, or if you don't remember what that is, detective controls are used to detect and alert unauthorized or unwanted activities within the organization. It helps to detect and react to security violations using tools, processes, and best practices. As for the second last one here, people, corrective controls. Wow, sounds like a prison, doesn't it? So corrective controls are used to remediate or mitigate the effect of a security incident. It includes measures to mitigate and prevent the same security incident from reoccurrence. I mean, it doesn't help you go and implement some sort of solution or mitigation to an incident, and then the next day it just goes and happens again. So at the end of the day, if something happens, we want to prevent that something from happening again in the same way. As the old saying goes, learn from your mistakes. And then, guys, the last one, recovery controls. So recovery controls are deployed to recover and restore the operating system to normal condition after the security incident. So what can we use for recovery controls? This could be something as simple and as easy as a backup. It could be that built-in functions into Windows like refresh and reset. All of those falls under this umbrella, which we call recovery controls. So if you break a machine, someone else breaks a machine, or let's say this is a server operating system, there's no rule that says here this is just limited to client operating systems. This could very well be a server operating system. So what can you or I or we use to restore an operating system which may or may not be client or may not be server? And if you go look at something like System Restore, that can actually also work. Unfortunately, System Restore is kind of limited to client operating systems. Other things you can go and use if this is a virtual machine, because let's face it, almost everybody and everything is using virtual machines these days. You can go and use something called snapshots, which are nowadays referred to as checkpoints. So if it's a virtual machine, you can basically go and revert this virtual machine back to an earlier state in time, very much like a System Restore, although System Restore just restores back the system. But a checkpoint or a snapshot literally restores the whole freaking machine back to an earlier state. Very cool and useful, don't you think? Alright, I think we've spoken enough about this topic. Let's move on to the next topic. Information security roles and responsibilities. So for those of you that don't know, a security policy is a formalized statement that defines how security will be implemented within an organization, and it describes the means the organization will take to protect the confidentiality, availability, and the integrity of sensitive data and resources. So think of it as a guideline, a set of rules. So every company is going to be unique in their own way. I mean, I can't say what works for my company is going to work for your company. So depending on what industry you're in, well, I suppose also depending on what country you're in. So depending on the country you're in, the industry you're in, what your company is, what they do, that will dictate what your security policy will be. So if you are, for example, a bank, there's a certain way you will need your employees to behave. So depending on the department you're in the bank, depending on what you do in the bank, that's what the security policy will be all about. So it's got a lot to do with what industry you're in and what you do in that company. The security policy basically says what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do in your company or organization. So the implementation of a security policy to support the goals of the CIA triad might be very different from a school, a multinational accounting firm, or a machine tool manufacturer. It's going to be different for every organization, guys. So one place might be a bank, the next might be a law firm, the next might be a school or a college or university. Every company and every entity is going to be unique, and their security requirement needs are going to be unique. The way they need their users and staff to behave is going to be unique. So every situation is going to be unique. I suppose you could say every company is like a human being. They're unique in their own way, and their needs and requirements are unique in their own way. So it's up to you and your company, or that of your client's company, to try and figure out what is going to work for you or what is not going to work. And at the end of the day, all of these companies, organizations have the same interest, and that is to ensure the employees, equipment, and data are secure against attack or damage. Now, as part of the process of adopting an effective organizational security posture, employees must be aware of their responsibilities. At the end of the day, a company can go and implement policies. The IT team, which may or may not be you can go and implement policies and measures. But I'm not sure if you guys ever heard that saying, you can bring the donkey to the water, but you can't make the donkey drink. There's an old saying like that. So it means I can't always go and force something down people's throats. I can bring them the tools, I can show them how to go and do it, but at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the people to go and actually implement this. So yes, the directors and the owner of the company are going to have some level of responsibility. They want us to behave a certain way. Yes, the IT managers and all those people that's high up, they will have a certain level of responsibility, and they can to a certain extent enforce some of these policies. But at the end of the day, it's also responsibility of the normal end user. They need to make sure they don't do certain things. This can be something as stupid and as simple as not sharing your password. Something as silly as making sure your PC is up to date. I can't always force the person to make sure they've got a secure password. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. So I need to tell these people, sir, ma'am, when you get an email from somebody that you don't know, please don't open it. If you get a weird, suspicious attachment in that email, or a weird, suspicious link in that email, please don't click it. Now, I apologize, folks. I'm using an email as an example here, but that's probably a very common example you'll experience of your users. End of the day, I can tell my users not to go and do those things I've just said, but that's all I can do. I can tell them not to go and do that, but I can only hope that they will not actually go and do that. So when I can stop them, yeah, that's a different story. So at the end of the day, the overall responsibility for the IT function lies with a Chief Information Officer, which we call CIO for short. This role might also have direct responsibility for security. Some organizations will also appoint a Chief Technology Officer, which we call CTO for short, with more specific responsibility for ensuring effective use of new and emerging IT products and solutions to achieve business goals. In larger organizations, however, internal responsibility for security might be allocated to a dedicated department which is run by a Chief Security Officer, which we call CSO for short, or just Chief Information Security Officer, CISO. Now, as for managers may have responsibility for a domain, such as a building control, web services, or accounting. So managers also have a certain level of responsibility, even though they might not necessarily be an IT manager. All managers still have a certain level of responsibility. And then when it comes to the technical staff and specialist staff, they have responsibility for implementing, maintaining, and monitoring the policy. Security might be made of a core competency of systems and network administrators, or there may be dedicated security administrators. One such job title, guys, is Information Systems Security Officer, which we call ISSO for short. As for non-technical staff, that's just your normal everyday users, those people that don't really know what they're doing. And let's face it, even though you tell them, don't click on that link, don't open that attachment, let's face it, you're still going to get those pesky users that are going to go and do that. So as for the non-technical staff, they also have the responsibility of complying with policy and with any relevant legislation. So yeah, we can tell them not to go and do that, but whether they actually do that, yeah. You can bring the donkey to the water, but you can't make it drink, like I said earlier. Now, if you don't know what due care or liability is, because I've got it listed here for you guys in front of you, that is external responsibility. So external responsibility for security, which we call due care or liability, that lies mainly with directors or owners, something I did briefly mention earlier. Now, though again, it is important to note that all employees share some measure of responsibility. It doesn't matter if you are the owner, a director, if you work in security, or even if you are just a normal measly user. At the end of the day, everybody has a responsibility to make sure they do their part. At the end of the day, there's another saying here that says you're only as strong as the weakest link. And if you don't train your staff not to go and do certain things, guess what? Something bad's gonna happen. You can have security that looks like it's straight from NASA, for crying out loud. But if you did not train your staff not to go and click on those pesky links, boom, you're still gonna get ransomware. Boom, you're still gonna get hacked. Doesn't help much now, does it? Alright, folks, let's move on to the next topic: information security competencies. Now, what this is all about is just because you work in security doesn't mean you're just gonna be working with security. It's not always that simple. It's never that simple. So, if you are going to be working as the security or in the security department of a company, you're gonna have to be competent in quite a few things. So if you are studying for the Security Plus course, guys, you'd be wise to also go and study a couple of other things and to familiarize yourself with a couple of other things. For example, a lot of you guys might have already done N Plus, Network Plus. Now that's really going to help you guys, because at the end of the day, if you've got some sort of networking background, even if you haven't worked in networking, if you just have the certification, that's going to help you a lot. You do need to have a certain level of knowledge with certain things if you want to be able to protect those things. You can't protect something if you don't understand that something. So how do you expect to protect a network if you don't know networking? How do you expect to go and do risk management if you don't understand what risk management is? So it's not as simple as, hey, let me go and attend a Security Plus course and now I can go into security. No. You do need to have a certain level of experience with a couple of other random things out there. So with that in mind, we can say IT professionals working in a role with security responsibilities must be competent in a wide range of disciplines, from network and application design to procurement and human resources. Yep, I kid you not. Now, I'm going to give you guys a bit of a list of a couple of competencies that you guys might want to go and look at. Obviously, this list is not the full list, but this is a very decent list of things you need to know, especially from an exam perspective. So you need to participate in risk assessments and the testing of security assessments, and you need to also be able to make recommendations to security. So for you to be able to make recommendations in security, you need to understand security. You need to understand risk assessments. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make recommendations to your company or your client's company. You need to specify, source, install, and configure secure devices and software. You need to set up and maintain document access control and user privilege profiles. You're going to have to monitor audit logs, review your users' privileges, and document access controls. Now, just because everybody's got access to what they need to have access doesn't mean everything is just going to be sunshine and rainbows, guys. Sometimes some folks have got too much privilege. Maybe you or somebody in your company gave someone access temporarily once upon a time to go and do a certain task, and you or this other technician completely forgot about that. Meanwhile, this user's got too much access now. And in IT, we always live by the golden rule of least privilege. So there's many tools out there that we can go and use to achieve this task, to go and see what privilege someone has, what they don't have, because at the end of the day, let's face it, it doesn't help you ask the users if they've got too much access, because even if they do know, they're not going to tell you. But most of the time, they're not going to know. They'll just see, oh, I can access the following. I'm not supposed to, but I can. And they'll keep it to themselves, which is not a good thing. Now, under security competencies, you need to also be able to manage security-related incident response and reporting. So what if something happens one day, security-wise? What if there's a malware attack? What if someone hacks you? Or what if there was a breach? What are you going to do about it? You need to be able to handle that and manage that. You need to be able to create and test business continuity and disaster recovery plans and procurement. So in the event of a failure of some kind, you need to be able to make sure there's a solution in place that can keep the business up and running. Nothing should be down. And if it is going to be down for whatever reason, it needs to be minimal. The time needs to be minimal. So ideally, we want to keep the business, your business or your client's business, up and running. Or we need to get them back up and running as quickly as possible. Lastly, folks, you need to actively participate in security training and education programs. This can be something as simple as sending an email to users telling them, guys, please note, don't open mails from people you don't know. I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. This is very important. Send mails to your people. Tell them, don't do this, don't do that. Now, unfortunately, we know a lot of users, they're going to read this, it's going to go in the one ear, it's going to go out the other ear, and they're not going to comprehend what they just read. Some people will just ignore the mail. Actually, a lot of people are probably just going to ignore the mail. I've seen this happen in so many companies where the IT team, like me and you, will send people various emails which are very important, and 9 out of 10 people are going to ignore it like a stop sign at a street. They're going to ignore it, they're going to skip it, and that's bad, guys. And only when the day comes, when D-Day comes, when the poop hits the fan, they'll be like, oh, I never saw that mail. Oh, oops, I didn't know. Meanwhile, you've been sending the mails all along telling them, don't do this, don't do that. And they just decided to ignore these mails of yours. So it's frustrating being an IT. I hope you guys have got the patience for it. Alright folks, let's move on to the last topic in this video. Information Security Business Units. So the following units that I'm about to list for you guys are often used to represent the security function within the organizational hierarchy. The first one I've got for you guys is something called Security Operations Center, which we just call SOC for short. If you don't know what this is, it's a location where security professionals monitor and protect critical information assets across other business functions. This could be things such as finance, operations, sales and marketing, and so on. Now, because the Security Operations Center can be very difficult to establish, maintain, and let's not forget finance, they're usually employed by larger corporations like a government agency or a healthcare company. So basically how this works is you may or may not work for a big company. Let's say it's a big company. Now, just because it's a big company does not mean the Security Operations Center is in-house. It might be, it might not be. I've seen huge companies that's got no IT department, or the IT department is very small or quite limited. Now, usually it's going to be quite large. Now, if you have an IT department, let's say you're lucky and you've got an IT department, it doesn't mean they're very good at security. That might potentially be outsourced to a third party potentially. You never know. It might be a third party, which is basically what this comes down to. The same applies to normal basic IT needs. A lot of companies out there, big and small, sometimes they've got no in-house IT, other times they've got minimal in-house IT. And whenever they need some sort of technical expert to assist them, they will log a ticket or a job card of that other third-party company, and they will assist them timelessly. I know this because I used to work for one of these companies as one of the main engineers. So I was working for a company, and my job was to service hundreds, if not thousands of clients. Sometimes I would just sell them products, like a PC or a network cable. Easy peasy, easy day. Other times we had to sell them solutions. I had to be an engineer. I had to help them remotely. I had to go out to them, give them recommendations, give them mitigations and all that. Sometimes I had to go and just swap a hard drive. I would go out to the client, swap a hard drive. This can be for a private company, can be for the government sector. Other times I had to go and build them server rooms or build them server room environments, build them a solution of some kinds. Other times I had to go and implement security solutions of some kind. So some days were quick and easy. Other days were just wow. I don't want to talk about it. It's just wow, some of these days. So it's completely random. But the point here is it was outsourced to a third party in that scenario, and I was that third party. Now, another information security business unit we get, this is the second one out of three I'm going to list for you guys, is DevSecOps. So network operations and use of cloud computing make very increasing use of automation through software code these days. Now, folks, traditionally, software code would be the responsibility of a programming or developing team. But I'm not sure if you guys have seen these days, there's so many features, so many platforms, so many programs. We need little to no coding experience. So if you are somebody that's got no coding experience, guess what? You can go do coding. There's platforms out there that can allow you to make your own website, your own program. And guess what? You would have no experience when it comes to coding. There's tools like that out there. It's kind of like an AI of sorts. When you guys have probably seen ChatGPT and Gemini and all those platforms these days by now, the AI these days that we've got is just insane. So with DevSecOps, separate development and operation departments or teams can lead to silos where each team does not work effectively with the other. And to add on to this, if that doesn't make sense to you guys, development and operations is a cultural shift with an organization to encourage much more collaboration between developers and system administrators. Because generally in the past, I don't know if you guys have seen, but developers and administrators just don't get along. I'm an administrator, and I've got quite a few colleagues which are developers, and in the past, developers and administrators just generally don't get along. Now, there are a couple of rare cases where developers and administrators might potentially be the same person, but that's very rare. Normally, developers and administrators are two different entities, and in most companies, these folks just don't get along. I don't know why, they just don't. So by creating a highly orchestrated environment, IT personnel and developers can build, test, and release software faster and more reliably. Now, this DevSecOps, guys, extends the boundary to security specialists and personnel, reflecting the principle that security is a primary consideration at every stage of software development and deployment. This is also known as shift left, meaning that security considerations need to be made during requirements and planning phases, not grafted on at the end, because that just doesn't work. The principle of DevSecOps recognizes this and shows that security expertise must be embedded into any development project. Ancillary to this is the recognition that security operations can be conceived as software development projects. Security tools, guys, can be automated through code. Who knew that? So consequently, security operations need to take on developer expertise to improve detection and monitoring. Now, as for the last information security business unit, guys, that would be incident response. Something I did kind of sort of touch on earlier. So you guys will see this is generally a dedicated computer incident response team, which we sometimes just refer to as a CIRT. If you don't know what it is, it's generally a single point of contact for notification of security incidents. You might potentially be in that central security point of contact. You never know. So if you guys keep up your security studies, you never know. You might be that central contact. So this function might be handled by the SOC, which we spoke of earlier, or it might be established as an independent business unit. So the SOC, like we said earlier, might be an outsourced entity. So maybe you work for that outsourced entity like I used to work, or it might be in-house. You never know. Either way, you might very well end up being in security one day. Alright folks, that is it. Can you believe it? That is the end of the first module. So before you guys disappear, just thank you very much for watching this module. I truly hope you guys have learned something in this first module of Security Plus. There's still 15 more modules to go before we've covered everything in Security Plus, so it's still a lot of content we need to cover. Please do not attempt the exam unless you've covered everything in Security Plus. Otherwise, there's a chance they might ask you about something that you feel very uncomfortable about, or something you've never heard about. If you guys have learned something in this video and if you've enjoyed it, please do me a favor. Give this video a like. It does help me, it does help the video, and it also helps the channel. If you'd like to know when Module 2 comes out or any of my other content, maybe consider subscribing, otherwise you might miss it. And then lastly, folks, thank you to everybody supporting and sponsoring the channel. Thank you to those of you clicking on the thanks button below a video if it's available in your country. To those of you buying me a milkshake or coffee. By the way, if you want to sponsor or support the channel, you can find that links in the video description down below. And then those of you making PayPal donations, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate that. That does help me make more of these videos. And then lastly, guys, the Patreons. The Patreons. Guys, thank you very much. I cannot say thank you enough. Thank you for helping me make more content like this so we can help more people out there. I really appreciate you guys. Here's a list of the Patreons as well. Alright guys, and then the last thing I'll mention here before I conclude this video is the channel does have a Discord server for those of you that's new on my channel. So if you guys want to join the Discord server, that link is in the video description down below. It's the very last link in the video description. I'm in there, other IT trainers are in there, people studying for Security Plus are in there, amongst many other courses. So if you want to ask questions, you can ask them there. If you want to help other people studying for this course, you can also go and do it there. There's lots of courses being covered in there, and it's completely for free. Alternatively, you might also find additional resources in there. Who knows? Alright, folks, I will see you in Module 2 of my Security Plus course.